time, of course, as always, to dive into my overall thoughts and first impressions of GT7 1.48, aka the May update, and we have 5 vehicles, of course. We already knew thanks to the trailer, and before that really, there would be no circuit this time around. There are a couple of new career mode events. You'll actually see me driving in those events in the various vehicles in this video. Probably the most significant one for many people will be the 800 point event, wherein you can earn a couple hundred grand, I guess with a bonus as well, depending on how you drive, and I'll be driving the NSX GT500 car on that one. Now chances are I'll probably put in the thumbnail something related to either Volvo coming back, which of course is the key standout in a general sense, but also for me, after driving all 5 cars, the one which I'm the most impressed by, the most pleasantly surprised by as well, is actually the NSX. And the reason why it surprised me is because some of you will remember years and years ago on the channel, in the, I think, very early days of my car reviews back in the potato cam days, I used to not particularly like any, really, of the NSX Super GT cars because back in Gran Turismo 6, they had what I used to call pivot point steering, where it felt like all the cars kind of steered from the middle rather than the front end, and it made them feel quite twitchy with Gran Turismo 6's graphics. Of course, we're now a couple of games removed from that, but I still don't find myself using the NSX quite as much, because with the mid-engine layout, it's a little bit less predictable than something like a Supra or a Skyline with a more traditional front-end rear-wheel drive kind of approach. Now though, with this one, I have to say, I love this thing. I drove it completely untuned, completely unmodified, just with a change in livery, and that was it. Didn't even change the tyres, the downforce, nothing. Took it out to that 800 point event, won it pretty easily, short shifting, lean out the fuel, lasted the entire race pretty easily, and that was even after doing a good, I think, 2 or 3 laps on the most inefficient setting for fuel as well, so the most left leaning towards power rather than leaning out the fuel. So that's pretty impressive straight off the bat. So for a first impression of a car that I specifically didn't used to like, now coming back for the first time ever, of course, in HD glory for this older generation of GT500 NSX, it's pretty great. Already there are a ton of liveries from people who absolutely love the car. In terms of pricing, it is in the legendary dealership, not too surprising there. It's 1.5 million, so not too crazy. I could see it potentially going up in future. Cars don't really seem to go down that often, occasionally, but not often. And in terms of the overall cost of this update, you're looking at barely over 1.8 million. So in other words, 1.5 mil of that is just the NSX, and then all of the other cars are much, much less. Now, of course, I'll give my brief thoughts, a couple of minutes on each car in this video, and then in the following days on the channel, as always, I'll be reviewing each car individually and crucially focusing in on what they can do when they are upgraded as well, to give you an idea of the kind of top-end potential if you drop the few hundred grand per car into modifying them. In terms of other stuff apart from the cars and the events, well, of course, we have new engine swaps as usual. Again, I will be covering those in their own dedicated video tomorrow on the channel. They've mostly focused in on Hondas this time around. A few Civics, the Integra, and the Nissan Skyline also is in there as well. That car was long overdue for an engine swap, given how long we've had Nissan Silvia-based engine swaps around for, and at least off the top of my head, and I could be wrong here, so feel free to correct me if I am, but at least from what I can remember, this is the first time I can think of where a vehicle has been added in an update and immediately has an engine swap available as well. And it's actually the SiR-II Civic. You can immediately put an Integra DC2 engine into it, which is pretty cool. It seems like Gran Turismo must have quite a bit of love for this Civic, giving it that kind of preferential treatment. It's got some pretty cool visual upgrades. You can kind of turn it into a smaller version of the Time Attack Civic, and even the addition of that Time Attack Civic as well being another version, again, of this car. And of course, Gran Turismo has always had a pretty strong plethora of Civics, but it still goes to show that they really do seem to quite like the EG shape. In terms of what this Civic is like to drive, it's a lot of fun. I didn't fully build this one for the video. It looks fully built because of the livery, but it isn't. I've stripped it out, put it on, I think, slightly better tyres, I think it was, or it might be standard, I don't recall. Lowered it down, stiffened up the springs a bit. So a fairly basic build, not much in terms of changing power aside from like an air filter and the exhaust. That was pretty much it. I used it for one of the new events, and it's a lot of fun to drive. I will definitely say I prefer this over the Time Attack version, which I've said before I prefer the normal cars over the aftermarket or SEMA show cars 9 times out of 10 because they're just more versatile. you can put more of your own spin on it, and even though the show cars look cool, and sometimes they are very quick, they feel much more limited in scope more often than not, and I feel like for a lot of the JDM heads, they'll probably agree on this one. Next up we have, of course, the Skyline. This is one which I was looking forward to trying out. One of the biggest differences, of course, with this era of the Skyline compared to what we've come to expect from the newer vehicles, be it GTR, an R33, R32, R34, is that this one is rear-wheel drive instead, and it's not a GTR, it's a GTS-R. Of course, back from Gran Turismo's past, once again, first time in full HD glory. You can have a nice little body kit on it as well, some pretty cool visual upgrades also. Incidentally, the visuals do change depending on whether or not you have the wide body. The front bumper in particular looks notably different. It's also got by far the biggest tow hitch on the back that I've seen on any car in the game. You'll see it in the video. It almost matches up to the size of the race exhaust, which is kind of nuts. But this is a great car to work with as well. It's always had that kind of snowplow look with that big chin splitter as standard, the lower front end, the raised rear end, of course, motorsport-based vehicle in terms of its legendary history. Doubtless many people will be doing replicas of that. Maybe I will as well in future for special projects. You never know. And for me at least, I have always loved this kind of generation of the Skyline. The R31 is a great looking car. It's a lot lighter as well, partially from not having four-wheel drive, but just in general, a lot of classic cars do tend to be lighter. They were much simpler back then, and even though you don't often think about it, a lot of classic cars are actually smaller than many vehicles today. You can take like a luxury car from back in the day, park it next to even like a normal sized modern car, and the modern car will look a lot bigger. 9 times out of 10, especially on width, is something I've definitely noticed. So overall, the Skyline is pretty damn great to drive. It is a used vehicle, not a legendary vehicle, but has a legendary price tag. It's more like 170 grand. It's actually over that, 176. It does kind of blur the lines between what is eligible to be a used car and what's eligible to be a legendary car. It seems a bit weird there, a bit of a mismatch. If anything, if I had to be a conspiracy guy, I would assume that maybe they've only done that because it's Japanese, so they want you to be able to buy it more often than it would be in the Legends dealership, but like I said, that's only a conspiracy, who knows. And some of the cars are just stupidly priced anyway in this particular dealer. The Civic being a prime example, the SiR-II is 50 grand. Which is just dumb for a Civic. Now though, of course, we have to get into the elephant in the room, the blue and yellow IKEA elephants from Volvo. These are a long-awaited return. Not these specific cars necessarily, but the brand as a whole. Volvo, Lotus, a couple of others too, really, really hotly anticipated cars in terms of either just having them as a wish list kind of vehicle, or specifically being rumoured or leaked, or from data mining lists in the case of this one. The Volvo Wagon was not in the data mining list, at least from what I can recall. The V40, on the other hand, was. Of course, the V40, the 2013 car here, in T5R design, is the only car in the brand new dealership section of the game. It's 40 grand, so it's pretty cheap to buy. And in terms of its spec, I must admit I wasn't too familiar with the car. I kind of assumed it would be an all-wheel drive vehicle. It's not, it's actually front-engine, front-wheel drive, turbo-aspirated, not too surprising there. About 210 horsepower standard. You can build it to a lot more than that, and the version that I feature in its own review will be fully built, and we'll talk about what kind of stuff it can attain in that section. Being front-wheel drive, it's sometimes a mixed bag. You can have a car which is absolutely fantastic with a front-wheel drive platform, or you can have some which just completely miss the mark, end up super heavy and take a lot of work to really bring them in line. And from Volvo, I think it has the advantage that you're probably not expecting quite as much from it. Most people aren't going to go into driving something like a Volvo V40 expecting the world, as you would from something like maybe a Civic Type R or a Ford Focus RS or whatever else, and that can definitely work to its advantage. Another vehicle which benefits from that, I think, is the Fiat Coupe, one of the strongest all-round front-wheel drive platforms, and also, incidentally, a car which was in the data mining list as well. Moving to the more memeable Volvo, of course, I believe, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but off the top of my head, I think the first estate car we've had in Gran Turismo, the iconic but not returning. Interestingly, this is not the returning version of the Volvo, because what we used to have was the 240 GLT. This is the less powerful Volvo 240 SE estate. It has just over 100 horses, 109 to be exact. It's not as heavy as you'd think though, and that is a crucial advantage. Looking at this thing, you'd probably think close to 2 tons. It's not even close. In fact, it actually weighs less than the Skyline, which is insane. 1,324 kilos is really impressive. It has some fantastic visual upgrades. The arch kit looks really cool. You've got rally spotlights, a comically oversized rear wing. It looks great with the change of grille, the change of back end. You can remove stuff like the wipers. A lot of love was put into this car, and it's great to see. This is one of the occasions where I really would love to have drivetrain swaps in the game, because this thing with 4-wheel drive on the dirt would just be so much fun. I haven't tried it on the dirt yet, but I'm sure it will be a lot of fun. Anyway, fully built, not too impressive. Again, it's a standard engine that you're working with that you're then just tuning up, but it's about 350-ish horsepower. The weight does make a lot of that up though, by being barely a ton, which is a pretty good combination to have. That's kind of like mid-tier sports car territory. It is a bit tail happy, which isn't too surprising given that there's very little weight, and even less of that weight is over the back end, and you've got a hell of a lot of counterbalance swinging around, so even with better tyres and upgrades and tuning, it's still a drift machine for sure, so it will be very, very popular for that, I have no doubt. And I do definitely think that this car will have an engine swap in future. I would be shocked if it doesn't get one. I would personally probably bet on something like a really over-the-top V8, maybe like a Rampage engine. I could easily see them doing something like that, maybe even the Maverick. Something just really stupid, which might end up making it really difficult to drive as well when it's already got that slip-slidey issue. But again, would make a pretty badass drift car, and this one I have no doubt people will be building into all kinds of stuff. I really like this one. The fact that it is so much more tail happy than the old 240 GLT ever was in Gran Turismo. That was a fairly standard car to drive through corners. It was quite neutral, if I recall correctly, even when you modified it. This is nothing like that. Far more realistic, far more tail happy. I think that tail happiness might even put some people off liking it, because it's a bit more challenging than you might expect. But it's a lot of fun to hoon it around. It looks great, of course that's a matter of perspective, and it's one of those cars that you either get it or you don't. Some people, I saw sentiments of like, it's ugly, what's the point of this, I don't see why people are loving it so much. If you don't get it, you just kind of don't get it. But looking into Volvo's history and some of the cars like the 240, the 242 Turbo and Forza for example, they're pretty awesome cars. And incidentally, the Volvo 240, also of course in the used dealer, is about 40 grand as well. So in the used dealer, I don't think they change the prices quite so much, but even if they did, I don't think this one would probably go that crazy on price. So like I said, all in all, you're looking at just over 1.8 mil. In terms of other stuff that's changed, well, there is a new collation of scapes where you can adjust the camera height, so nothing too special there. There is a new menu book as well for the classic side of the Super GT selection, so the Pennzoil Skyline, the Calsonic or the Castrol Supra, sorry, I should say, and of course the new NSX as well. That one for me at least won an engine roulette ticket, so not exactly a big deal. Thankfully, the engine swap that I got was pretty cool. It was the Lamborghini Aventador engine swap, the LP 750, I believe it was. So that's pretty cool, I guess, but it's not like you can't just buy that anyway. And ultimately, I think that's pretty much it for my thoughts on this particular update. I would be interesting to know if anyone's noticed any weird glitches, perhaps, maybe some events that might have been glitched. I've definitely noticed they seem to be on top of that a lot more. They obviously don't want people earning more money than they should be, so they seem to have ironed out a lot of those opportunities, but having a couple of new events to do, one new menu book, I guess it's something to do, but as always, not exactly going to take you too long. I've already completed all of it before even making this video, and I'm sure many of you have as well. So that's it for my overall thoughts. Like I said, definitely stick around for the next week at least on the channel, wherein I will be talking about all of the cars in their individual reviews. In future, some of these probably will end up being in special projects in some form or another, definitely once engine swaps come into the mix. And like I said, stick around tomorrow for two things in particular, because I'll be doing the engine swaps update video with the new ones showcased there, and also in the members section of the channel, I'm very pleased to announce that part 4 of the High Roller project is dropping, which, again, for those who have no idea what I'm talking about, in real life I'm building a basically Rolls-Royce monster truck, for want of a better term. I'm putting a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow Mark 1 on top of a Mitsubishi Warrior and kind of building my own version of like like a Dakar rally raid truck, but which looks and has the interior of a Rolls-Royce, and a turbo diesel, locking diff, four-wheel drive, crazy setup underneath. It's fully built now, it's exactly how it's going to look. The roof is about 6 foot tall, it's got about a foot of ground clearance, looks super badass, and there's not too much left to do. So in the members section on the channel, that will be up tomorrow, and of course, like I said, check out the engine swaps vid if you're not a channel member. But I'll see you then with those, and for now, thanks for watching.